Hello,
Ask me the questions.
and welcome to Marriage Minutes at
His
Pace.
Pace.
Today, we're going to discuss a topic that affects us all, and that is the daddy void. And so, Rhonda, could you please give us a
said, don't ask
definition?
me any questions. Didn't I just say that?
What is a daddy void?
The daddy void is really the feeling and emotion and the sensation that you have as a result of not being raised by your father, whether physically or emotionally. Meaning that your father could have not been present physically, or he could have been emotionally absent. And it has been proven, and studies have shown that children, whether you are male or female, have an adverse reaction to a father not being in the home. And so that's basically what it is. And so I have studied that myself, basically about women and their reaction to the daddy void, but quite certainly it happens to men and women alike. They're just different responses to it.
What are some behaviors or characteristics that manifest because of a daddy void?
Well, I think that children innately feel like it's their fault if their father is absent. And so they take on the guilt and the pain of their father not being there. And so as a result of that, they respond or have triggers, or respond to triggers, or have certain reactions that cause them to be certain ways. They can be overly controlling. They can be avoiders. They can be people that are people pleasers as a result of that. They can be somebody that fantasizes constantly about who their dad is or what their dad could have been. So there are a lot of things that a person can end up being as a result. It's the response to the void.
Okay. So within the confines of marriage, how does a daddy void affect a marriage?
I don't know. How does a daddy void affect a marriage?
I'm asking you. That's what the people want to know. How does a daddy?
They don't want to know from me.
Not who's on second and what's on first.
Here we go. You know what? In a relationship, I think that it can have many faces. I think that it can show up in many ways. I think that if you're talking about a little girl who is afraid, because it all comes back down to fear of that abandonment and that rejection that that child felt. What I mean by that is this. If you grew up with your father and they left when you were 6 years old, you are going to constantly have that feeling inside of you of that 6-year-old little girl. And you may in some ways experience arrested development. So it means like emotionally you kind of stay at that spot. And so then you grow up, you become successful financially, your career, whatever the case may be, you pledge sorority, whatever the case, and you become somewhat successful and you get married. When your spouse, in whether he's trying to or not, makes you feel like or triggers that response that that 6-year-old girl felt, you go right back to that and you have those same reactions that that 6-year-old girl felt. But the difference is that 6-year-old girl was helpless. As a grown woman, you're not. So you will pop off or run off or fantasize off or do whatever it is to try to eat that feeling away. Now, I'm not done. I'm done. I'm not done, but I'm done. It's your turn to talk about the man and daddy void.
Well, what do you got? Answer my question.
How does the daddy void show up in a man's life?
I think it manifests in many different ways. I know for me, with my father being emotionally absent because of his own dysfunction that he grew up in, I think sometimes it's just empty, no emotional support or being there, or not consistency. There was no consistency in the home. And so it's tough because you're always looking for that camaraderie, and you're always looking for that pat on the back, or the things that you need to give you confidence as a young man growing up in this world. And so I think you strive for perfection, that you have to be the best that you can so that you can get noticed and so that you won't be rejected, which really and truly, the daddy void is like the fruit, but really and truly, the symptom or the core at it is the sense of being abandoned and rejected, and how that makes you feel. And so I think whenever you feel that in different scenarios in your life, be it organizations or be it within a work environment or within relationships, whenever you feel that trigger of rejection or abandonment, you just know that what it feels like. So either it's going to push you further down, or you're going to overcompensate so that you don't ever feel that rejection or abandonment again. And so uh, it's so impactful, but it takes a while for you to really realize what's at the core, and that's being rejected and abandoned.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think so many people go throughout their adult life not even realizing that that is what is happening to them, and especially in relationships, then you end up being in this trigger cycle. You get triggered, then they get triggered. You get triggered, then they get triggered, and you sit in this conundrum of going back and forth and triggering one another, and not even realizing that it really all has to do with the symptoms that were that manifest when you were a child.
And I think too, even so, if one of the in a marriage, if one person had their father in a home, uh, they don't fully understand. So I think having communication and being open and honest of what it felt like not having a particular parent in a home, and that abandonment, it's just communication. You got to talk. You got to understand. I mean, once my father came back into it and was emotionally there, there was a certain level of resentment for me. I didn't want to hear it because I was beyond my point of what I thought needing my father to emotionally uh, draw into me and pour into me. It's too late. You missed your window. And so there was a lot of animosity and resentment. And so, but it's funny because it didn't really manifest itself in our marriage until we had been married for about 10 years, and based upon other dysfunction that I experienced, it started to really come out that the core of it was just being abandoned, and all this blame that I had placed on other things or other people was just my own self-sabotage of not measuring up because I was abandoned or what abandonment had done to me. And so I think in marriage, you definitely have to uh, analyze that and deal with that, because that pain or that void is the area that I think whatever you believe in, for me, that's the area of my life that God wanted to heal the most, and He couldn't really get to it because I had built up so much, uh, many layers to protect myself and to quarantine myself, so to speak, not to be hurt in that aspect or ever to be vulnerable or ever to be rejected again. And so once I allow God to get in that area, and it takes work, it takes being honest. And, it's hard to say, oh, I grew up in a dysfunctional family. You just don't say that every day, but we all have some sort of dysfunction. And so daddy void is real. It manifests itself in many different ways, but I think once you realize it and once you start to uncover it, uh, God is able to do miraculous healing in that area, and you will be better for it, and you'll be able to move at your pace and do great things.
I want to say one more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
I said I wasn't going to.
No, you said that, yeah.
But you sparked some stuff in me.
Yeah.
I think that I made a promise to the 12-year-old girl that felt abandoned. I made a promise to her that I would never feel that way again. And so my response then when I'm triggered is to go all off and to balls to the walls, if you will, because I made a promise to her that you are never going to feel that way again. And it ends up I still end up cutting myself because I sabotage this relationship, but I made a promise. And that promise was firm to that 12-year-old girl. You will never feel like this again. And so I have to temper that with the Holy Spirit for me and allow him to minister to me so that I'm not replicating that. And that's the last thing I want to end on. A lot of times we end up either overdoing what our parents did or underdoing what our parents did. So we'll say, I'm never going to do that. My dad did that to me and I'm never going to do that. And so then we overcompensate. Or we say, my dad did that to me and I'm never going to do that. And we undercompensate. And so again, for me, for us, we use God and the Holy Spirit often to try to make a balance in our lives, because we've done pretty well because we're aware of the daddy void, but we can go way back down there if we don't allow God to temper us and to balance us. I am completely done now.
And I'll even add this and we'll close. And even my daddy void has even affected my relationship with God, because he has set, my earthly father has set a precedent in my life of what I should expect from a father. And so when those things are inconsistent, or when I find myself in my own strength and able to do things outside of my father, I survived, Dad. I didn't really need you. I didn't really have to have you in my life. I made it. I'm successful. Sometimes that even shows up with my spiritual father. And so I know for me, I've had to even temper myself and realize that, the stewardship that my father did in my life, he was flawed. And I have to accept that he did the best with what he had. And being human in this world means that we all fall short. And so I take that and then I place it on the altar, and then I allow God to start to really work on me through his Holy Spirit and through whatever means he wants to do to help me be a better man. And so that it doesn't end up being generational. So this was long, but we just know that the daddy void is important. That part right there. That one right there. Yeah. So, but daddy void, we all suffer from it, good or bad, but we know that God is able. Be well and be blessed.